everyone has been in an argument at one point or another, and it kinda sucks when you're starting to lose, so what can you do when your opponent has the upper hand? Well, you could employ these secret techniques known as logical fallacies, which will allow you to spin the conversation into a direction more amenable to your position. I even have a super secret technique that I will be sharing with you at the end of the video that 60% of the time works every time. Let's start off simple with something basic that you can use in almost every situation. The NS fallacy, or the non sequitur fallacy, can allow you to quickly change the topic if you're cornered in your argument. For example, you could be arguing about punishments for crime and they could hit you with a statistic or fact that destroys your whole argument. I'll let friend of the channel Poopy from the Poopy Show explain what I mean.
Actually, I think violent criminals should be put to death. Well, actually, it says here using the Norwegian prison model, we can reduce crime by 0.01% if we spent $10 billion.
Now, this is where we implement the non sequitur technique.
That's an interesting rebuttal, but didn't your wife leave you for a Laotian midget named Requise? Yes. I think you should be looking up the Norwegian model on how to avoid a divorce before we start getting into prison reform.
You see that? You instantly win the argument by changing the topic. And because it was also a personal attack, it left him too flustered to continue, and by default, you win the argument. You see, all it really takes to be a good debater is a little creativity. What we have next is the BPF. Now this one is very person specific, but if your opponent meets the criteria for this fallacy, you can easily win the argument just by using it. The BPF is the bald person fallacy. How it works is you basically just remind your opponent that they're bald, and immediately you win the argument. We even have a video example of the technique in action. It's a classic. I could give you context for the clip, but honestly it doesn't really matter.
Bye, baby.
You know what you need? You need to be removed from the gene pool because you're too stupid to be alive.
Yeah?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
no hair, sweetie. Oh, baby.
Touch me. Touch me.
No!
Touch me.
You can immediately see the technique work with full effect. Anything the bald man said prior to the BPF was rendered completely moot. You can even go frame by frame and see the exact moment that the bald guy completely loses his shit. Yep, slow it down right about here. You see the small change in facial expression? The penny has dropped. He was reminded of his own mortality staring back at him. The shame instantly washes over him and he becomes immediately enraged, being reminded of his own hubris, completely destroying his ego and making him look both pathetic and the loser in the natural debate. Honestly, this is such a perfect technique. I recommend using the bald person fallacy whenever you can because it's like an Exodia move when it comes to arguments. You could be pro something evil like rent amnesty for single mothers, and I will still side with you if the other guy is bald. Honestly, a great fallacy to use. It even works with Norwoods. I would say that anything from Norwood 4 onwards is fair game for the BPF. All in all, a pretty good technique. Anyway, another one of my personal favorites is the CMS fallacy. Now, this one requires a little flair to make it seem convincing. The CMS fallacy, or the crystal meth smoke fallacy, is one that you preferably should only use while outside. But if necessary, enclosed spaces are even more effective. It starts again with you losing the argument. You then begin to start breathing heavily and telling your opponent that you might be having an asthma attack. They will then act worried and give you some time to get your quote-unquote inhaler. You then catch your breath using the inhaler, and one of two things can happen at this point. The opponent immediately leaves the debate stage because of the secondhand fumes from your inhaler, or your opponent is also a crack fiend and will ask you for a toke. At this point, you may as well forfeit the debate because the power move of asking you for a hit, whilst simultaneously beating you in the marketplace of ideas, is a double stroke that is hard to beat. The way to make sure that this doesn't happen though is that you can do a quick check to see if your opponent is missing any teeth, and if they are, I would advise against using this technique. The CMS, although situational, I believe you can get some good use from. Next up we have the ATAF. Now this is a more common one that people do like to call out, so the use of this technique to win arguments is somewhat limited. It really more depends on how stupid the person you are arguing with is. The ATAF is the appeal to authority fallacy, and I thought it would be best to showcase this in a small skit.
Whoa, that argument is dumb and wrong. Actually, Nietzsche spoke of this extensively in his works. Nietzsche commented on the underlying themes of conflict in the Talk to a podcast. Yeah, of course. What, have you not read Nietzsche or something? Didn't realize I was speaking to a pseudo-intellectual. No, yeah, you're right, it must have slipped my mind.
You can see this work with just about any figure or person who has perceived authority. Hell, even I have some perceived authority over you guys, which is why in half of my videos, I just make up fake facts and you guys slurp it up none the wiser. Next, we have the FF technique. Now, most of my 50 IQ league teammates will spam this one, but no, I'm not talking about forfeiting a match in Pace-Low Emerald. I'm talking about the fallacy. This one, much to the chagrin of my league teammates, actually requires the ability to think and is an advanced fallacy technique. It requires you to argue in favor of the position that you disagree with, using faulty logic so that your opponent catches onto that logic and assumes the position is also false. For example, I could tell you that trickle-down economics works because, wow, look at this cool image with the champagne and the glasses and everybody gets a glass of champagne. How great is trickle-down economics? Now, your opponent will probably, correctly might I add, assume that you are restarted. And because they have come to that conclusion, they will then also conclude trickle-down economics, therefore mustn't work because clearly this guy is an idiot and is wrong. Using this technique, you have convinced your opponent of your true position. Obviously, this is a very basic example, but it works even better on more complex topics. For example, you could argue that Israel is America's greatest ally and back that up by saying that they give America great intelligence through their Mossad. Now, everyone will clearly be able to see that this is bullshit because it was Mossad's head of intelligence, Ephraim Halevi, who knowingly told the US and Britain that there were WMDs in Iraq when internally they knew that this wasn't the case. This quote-unquote intelligence failure contributed to the death of thousands of US personnel, 1 million Iraqis, and spawned a number of terror groups which most of still are active to this day. It did, however, conveniently ensure greater security for the state of Israel in the Middle East. However, that's just a coincidence, I'm sure. Up next, we have the ATP fallacy. Sometimes it's referred to as the no true Scotsman fallacy, but we're going to refer to it as the appeal to purity, just for the sake of being consistent. A quality that only the truest of debaters possess. How to use this to win arguments is quite simple. You just need to refute any points made against the group that you're defending by stating as fact that no true, insert group, would actually do insert bad thing. I'll give you an example. Tax fraud is a serious crime. People who evade taxes are criminals and should face consequences. I don't know about that. I'm a tax fraud. For legal reasons, this is a joke. And I don't think tax fraud is really a big deal. I mean, real criminals are the ones who commit violent crimes like murder, not people who maybe sometimes don't pay taxes. But tax fraud is still illegal. It's stealing from the government, which affects everyone. Those people are criminals too. Nah, dude, you aren't getting it. Real criminals are the ones who hurt people. If someone's committing tax fraud, they're not really a criminal. They're just someone avoiding a small fine. Real criminals would never do something as harmless as that. And then you can just repeat this ad infinitum until they give in or get bored, giving you the victory by DQ. The next fallacy really depends on you as a person, and it was even used by one of the greatest Greek philosophers when he was losing a debate. I call it the YDL fallacy, or the you don't lift fallacy. And quite simply, it requires you to be much larger than your opponent, and when they get the upper hand on you in the debate, take off your shirt and start flexing. Now, if you have selected your opponent carefully, the mere sight of your lats should mog him so hard that out of sheer embarrassment, they may just disintegrate into dust. You might think that this is a stupid fallacy and that I'm making this up, but no. Plato was recorded multiple times standing up in the debate hall and flexing his arms when he thought that he was losing the argument. He was an Olympic wrestler, so you know he was packing some size. In fact, his name even comes from the word Platon, which means broad. So he was coming from the top rope with facts, logic, and the people's elbow. This probably goes without saying, but don't try this technique unless you are a physical specimen like Plato or myself. Our next logical fallacy is the SF, or the Strawman fallacy. This one requires you to be able to quickly analyze your opponent's argument, then misrepresent it in a bad faith way, and easily refute that misconstrued argument. Here's a pretty simple example. Well, I think that the government should do more to address loneliness and promote social connections, maybe through initiatives that encourage people to form meaningful relationships. So you want the government to force every man to have a girlfriend, even if they don't want one? Actually, no, wait. I kinda can get behind this. That's a great idea, actually. Wait, no, I didn't say anything like that. I'm talking about programs that help people form social connections, not mandating personal relationships. No, I agree completely. State-mandated girlfriends for everyone. Vote Stoic Stick for President 2028. Thick Latina bodies for everyone. And just like that, we bridge the gap and come to a sensible compromise that both parties can agree to. Vote Stoic Stick for President 2028. 2028 Stoic Stick for President. 1000 years Stoic Stick. Stoic Stick for Vice Senior Chairman of the Electoral Republic. Stoic Stick. Okay, that's enough. Time to get into the final logical fallacy that just about beats all other fallacies. The final logical fallacy is technically referred to as AH, ad hominem. But to merely call this technique ad hominem is ad hominem in itself. This technique can dismantle even the most well thought out and sound arguments in as little as 2 words. I'll give you an example of this technique. And just after exhausting all 743 different scenarios for why we should give the government more money, and going in depth into why a 90% income tax across all tax brackets would actually improve quality of life, I give the floor to you so that you may try to poke holes in my impenetrable argument. Yeah, well, that argument is well, aren't you going to address any of the points that I just made? Nah, it's and just like that, you've won the argument. Really, how can someone beat you in an argument if you just choose not to engage with the material and hurl verbal insults instead? A truly enlightened technique that I'm sure many of you will find good use with in your debating careers. But anyway, that's all we have for Logical Fallacies Explained. Definitely check out Poopy's channel. She's got some really good videos that I enjoy watching, so I would assume that you guys would too. But anyway, that's all we have for Logical Fallacies Explained. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing, but other than that, thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye.